I just want to, as usual, welcome everyone and thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us. We're excited to have Cesar Viveros, and George Rodriguez joining us today. We're going to be talking both about their artistic practices and also what they're planning to do on Saturday. So hopefully all of you also have Clayfest marked on your calendar for Saturday. It's from 12 to 6 on the 1400 block of North American Street, right in front of our nearly completed new building. And if you come, you might even be able to get a tour with Jennifer Martin, hard hat tour. So that'll be fun. Okay, we're going to start with our land acknowledgement of the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land where we are located and their continuing relationship with their territory. Over a period of 250 years, many Lenape people were removed and dispersed throughout the country. Some took refuge with other tribes. A large number of Lenape families remained in the homelands and continue the traditions of their ancestors up to the present day. I was able to see a program that was put out on Tuesday by the Friends of the Wissahickon that was about, it was with one of the people who works with the Pennsylvania Lenni Lenape tribe. And she was talking about language and the history of her own ancestors. So if you go over to the Friends of the Wissahickon, and I'll put it in the chat later, you can listen to that talk. And I've also been reading this wonderful quote by the Lenape chief Tamanend often, which is that he wished for peace between the indigenous people of the land and the descendants of the immigrants to the land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. And I realized I never really said, Chief Tamanend lived from 1625 to 1701, and he was the person who worked with William Penn and actually signed the treaty in 1683. So I wanted to put some historical context around that. Please do go in and do some research on your own. It's really important and fascinating. Okay, so welcome George Rodriguez, whose website states at the top that he is building community through art, which I think is a really important way to start when we talk to George. He was born and raised in the border city of El Paso, Texas. George creates humorous, decorative ceramic sculpture addressing his identity and community. Brought up by his mother and 4 older sisters, George quietly observed the love and hard work needed to maintain his family and community. His art began to manifest a search for his individualized voice. The first in his family to finish college, he received a BFA in ceramics from the University of Texas, El Paso, then went on to earn his MFA from the University of Washington. His world curiosity grew as a recipient of the Bonderman Travel Fellowship, where he traveled the world through most of 2010. This travel continues to have a profound impact on George and has helped his community grow. George was recognized as an emerging artist in 2019 by NCECA, and the Museums of Northwest Art awarded him the Patty Warashina Luminary Award in 2017. His work can be found in the permanent collection of the National Mexican Museum of Art in Chicago and the Hallie Ford Museum in Salem, Oregon. George is represented by Foster White Gallery in Seattle and is the artist in residence at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture in Philadelphia. I know he has a solo show up right now. He'll tell us about that later. Cesar Viveros Herrera has spent over 15 years creating public art in the United States and his native Mexico, and has collaborated with Mural Arts and lots of other organizations, including the Clay Studio, since 1997. His public work has been inspired by the communities he has served throughout the years, to whom he has become the extended voice of their particular ideology, recurring primarily on documentary work that helped him visually articulate these individual stories to be exposed to a broader audience. Aztec dancers and ceremonies, miniature altars, sculptures, fresco painting, mosaic, and featherwork are some signature elements of his work outside murals. And he's also been a member of our Making Place Matter Council for the last 1.5 years and was part of our Clay and Conversations project before that. So thank you both. I am going to start with Cesar because he's on my left. I don't know. Cesar, do you want to start by answering the question we talked about, which is how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Well, I didn't actually, I didn't formally study art. People get kind of a little surprised because I actually prepared myself to be a diver, like under the water, but more like not like a scuba. It's more like industrial.
Mm.
So it happened at a very young age. I started working on the Gulf of Mexico, bars, platform, different bases, and I thought that was what I wanted to do at the time. All of a sudden, I realized that I didn't like the life. As much as I love the water and being on the water and this exciting job, well paid and everything, um, I started missing so much the art that I did from my early years. I usually was painting little murals, a lot of art, different kinds, right? And one day I started reflecting on and kind of like going back into my memories. When I was about like 5 years old, just for context, Veracruz, where I come from, it's a heavy rainy season. It's very tropical. Veracruz is famous because the substrate, the soil is a lot of clay. Every time you dig something, there is clay. And my brother and I, we end up like doing so many objects out of clay. It was fun, the experience, the feeling that I had on those early years, kind of like made me feel so much that every time I decide to do something related to clay or color or drawing, it get me so excited. So it was very in the back of my mind. So as an adult, I just realized that I needed to, to change the way of living. I didn't foresee myself doing this for, the years ahead, and I just started giving a chance. That's when I decided to come to the United States. Lucky enough, I saw murals on the street. I've been doing that. I can do that. I volunteered for a mural. One of my friends, Meg Saligman, and from there I just started doing like a lot. I love like big scale, like extension. I came out with all these things that I always say that as I grow, I learned these things from my father, my uncle, my neighbor. Anything that I learn as I grow, I apply it to murals. It's just like a natural thing just to come up with cement, sculptures, anything. And that kind of like helped me to get a position here in Philadelphia. And from there, I kind of like, I can say I was able to buy more time. And then I started doing things that I usually didn't have the time, like ritual, as the dance, altars, all these things. All of a sudden, I was so busy doing all these things that I just, that's basically changed my life, and life itself kind of like guide me to do this way of living. So that's how I started doing art.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I've heard other artists say similar things, like it just sort of, it happens, you start to be interested in things, you get involved, and it just kind of evolves over time. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's your passion is leading you, and every time you take on a new project and do something that's maybe risky or that is new to you, like that's why I always use the word brave in that question, because I still think it's like a really important thing to acknowledge, that it's not easy. You have to make this really important decision. So thank you for sharing that with us. And now I'll go over to George and I'll ask him the same question.
Yeah, I'm also really curious about industrial diving.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, what is that? That's amazing.
You had just 6 things. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. A lot of that on your homeland.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I knew I wanted to do something in like the creative fields, but as Jennifer mentioned earlier, like I was one of the first in my family to go to college, so I really got into like formal art in college at the University of Texas El Paso, and I stuck around my hometown just because at that point in my life, like I didn't have the option to really move away from my family. So yeah, so I like went in with the idea of trying to get into graphic design, because I'm like, okay, I can do something creative, but still potentially come out of school and earn a living. That was my thought process. I was like, okay, so I took the graphic design classes, but because I was in the School of Art, I had to take introductory classes to ceramics, metal, sculpture, painting, like all the foundations. And I took ceramics first just because I wanted to get it out of the way. I didn't know anything about that material. I'd never worked with it. I thought it was only like little figurines and pottery, which at that point in my life I wasn't interested in. And I took the class like early, and I loved it. I had a great mentor, Vince Burke, who's still teaching there, who I've worked with collaboratively with students at Tyler and students at UTEP. So like we had a class together last year during the pandemic. And yeah, it's been great. And since then, you know, I still like moved into art education. I decided to leave graphic design. I moved into art education, but spent every single moment in the ceramic studio, and finally decided like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. And like shakingly, I like told my mother like, I'm gonna get a degree. I'm gonna get a BFA in ceramics. And she was like super happy and so like supportive. So yeah, so that's kind of how I like tiptoed in. I can't say I dived in, but I tiptoed into it.
Yeah. Well, it's always a process. I think I love that you talk about your mom. You've talked about her before and your sisters, and I can't help sort of thinking about the maternal influences of people. And Cesar shared something with us yesterday that he might be willing to share about his grandmother today, and that understanding of what art can do for your spirit. Would you?
Sure. That's one of the things that I always love to say. This story is always present because some of the details I see in myself at early age, but then with the years, some of the things have been filled in by my mother and my aunt. So it happened that when I was a kid, I remember that my grandmother on my mother's side used to go. I mean, every summer we go to the ranch. It's like an isolated place with just two families separated by a couple of kilometers. So this house is by itself, nobody else there. But so my grandmother and some of the younger kids live there with my grandfather. But the story goes like this. It says that when she was younger, she broke her comal. The comal is a piece of clay, for those who doesn't know. It's just like a piece of clay. I mean, this one I made it myself, but my grandmother used like huge comals. This is all made out of clay, right? So they say that one day her comal broke, and she asked my grandfather for a new one, and he was kind of mean and told her that he wasn't gonna buy her more of those. And she's like, all right. And then next thing, she goes to the river, to the side of the river, and she started collecting clay. And on her own, she started making all these comals. And then she started fighting up. My mom tells me that she get them all to get this clay, natural clay, on the bank of the river. And then she had the kids cleaning, like taking stones out, little pieces. And then she built all these ceramic pieces that I when I saw them, when I got old and I saw all this, like, how could it be that she, and a little woman, kind of like repressed by the husband, get independent herself, not just like create her own art, like out of nowhere, because we don't have that tradition in the family. She used to be in a better position before she got married. But then once she got with my grandfather, everything for her it was just work, and work. Nevertheless, and we're talking about like 70 years ago, like another times, and she was already making all these beautiful pieces out of clay. So the things that I remember is she used to go to the field. Sometimes she digs some sort of a hole and she put a lot of wood and she fired it up, and that's how she fired up all these pieces, not just comal, but different kind of pottery, and a huge vase for water that we have to fill in every day during the summer from the well. We had to carry the water and put on that. So that every time I remember that, like that inspired me so much because how she could like empower herself and being independent and find pleasure and so much joy on doing this. Because when I was 5 years old, I did my first pieces out of clay. The feeling is something that motivates me every day. Every time I have to do new art, every time I take a new project, that's the feeling that I need to feel to motivate myself, because it's something that I cannot even describe with words. So I honestly, I think that she has been one of my biggest influence when I talk about clay. Another instance, something like at that estate, at that ranch, when we grow corn, because my father and everybody grows corn over there on Veracruz, I mean on my family, and we used to find like all these different artifacts. I shouldn't even be displaying this, but anyway, we found all these like pieces of pottery that accelerate my imagination. If these people was able to do that, why I cannot do that? So as an early age, I started collecting all these artifacts. So when I came to Philadelphia and I have the opportunity to, like spend some time, I started doing my own ocarina. This is how I like, and this is the biggest influence from my grandma, because this is something that I mean you can learn on your own too. Honestly, I start doing these things on my mind. Like every time I do like a new piece, like I'm gonna teach this workshop. I'm gonna teach other people. I never find it time. Hopefully, 2021 is the year when I start like teaching all these things that I've been learning for the years.
Yeah. Oh, well, I know a place where it might work out. Anyway, it's such a beautiful story, and I think it really is important to talk about that idea, when you say the feeling that you feel every time you touch clay and every time you're sort of starting a new artwork, and nostalgia and the strength of all of our ancestors, I think is really important thing to remember and kind of reflect on. And then, I think about George, and we've talked about your travels around the world and going to different places. Can you maybe talk about a story of meeting people and having that same feeling of just like being energized by their ideas and working together on projects? Because I know you've talked about the inspiration of your travels a lot.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate right out of grad school to win a fellowship, and that fellowship really took me most of 2010 for about 10 and a half months to South America, different parts of Asia and Western Europe. So in total, I ended up like going to about 26 countries, like in a whirlwind of a year. But initially, one of the first places I landed was Peru, and I never traveled before, so I was the worst thing you can do is like ask people's opinions, because then they'll tell you like horror stories.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, well, thank you. I didn't have that stress before, but once I got there and I got into the rhythm of just like moving alone, I found out like I wasn't really alone. Like I met so many great people. There's this artist, Carlos Runzi Tanaka, who is Peruvian, who because of the ceramic connection, one of my professors, Akio Takamori, said, look this guy up. He lives in Lima. So I did. And he was very friendly, kind of just like took me in, spent a day together, and we chatted. And that happened all over the place. Like, I think having a ceramic knowledge, like there's a community already like built into that, and it's global. So I could meet people in Santiago in Chile. Met this woman, Pelusa Rosenthal, who has an art residency on the coast of Chile. So I met her just as she was like building it up, and we spent a day together and we just kind of toured around. But it was one of those things like I had to, a little bit of effort just to introduce myself. But then after that happened, it was easy. Yeah, so I don't know, that just made an impact. And then like continued travels into into parts of Asia and Western Europe, I started to like see connections with people like across continents, across countries, and just be like, oh, we're kind of all the same. Like we're, you know, innately we want similar things. We want to share our passions. We want to, you know, be comfortable, be in community with each other. And it was just like a great, you know, a great experience. And that really does inform a lot of my work, like cross-cultural connection, where imagery like that I thought wouldn't relate because of distance is so similar. Like ideas transcend land and time, really. So
yeah, that and we see that in your Zodiac series, which we'll see a little bit later. And I think what both of you are talking about and what we're sort of focusing on is this idea that the spirit of people and sharing ideas and sharing connections is such an important part of what each of you do as artists. And really, I mean, I don't mean to overstate, like it's what we do at the Clay Studio, and that's why it's so exciting that you guys are working with us on Saturday. But
can I also just really quickly say that you know, I've been in Philadelphia 2 years now, like almost to the day. And the day that my partner Marisol and I drove into Philly, like the day that we drove in after whatever, like a week and a half of driving, one of the first places we went was the Clay Studio. Never really been. Like we just stopped by and there was a talk. It's like, okay, let's go. That's a safe space. Like we'll just go and like hear a talk and meet some folks. So yeah, thank you for that.
oh, thank you for telling that story again. It's one of my favorites. Well, we're just so happy that you're a part of the community now, and it's so great to be working with Cesar and people who live around our new neighborhood in our new location. It's the people who matter. So thank you both. Okay, I'm going to show some pictures because I think people will want to see. We're going to start with Cesar's images as soon as I share my screen. Hold on. Okay. And there we go. So Cesar and George both sent me some images that they wanted to talk about to show everyone a little context for the other kinds of work that they do. So Cesar, do you want to talk about this one? And then just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Like every year, I'm invited to do a celebration related to Day of the Dead, UPenn Museum, the Art Museum, and different organizations. But there is always like kind of like I have to adapt myself to the space and everything, and I enjoy. I'm so grateful that I happen to do that. But last year during the pandemic, for the first time, I decided to do it on my own. So I say, okay, we have this a community in North Philly. We have these terrenos, this land that we have been cleaning for 9 years and have become like a place where we cook together and share ideas and work together and do so many things. So I decided to celebrate the Day of the Dead. So during the summer, with all the, well, basically I started like building this sculpture. His name is Mictlan Tecutli, who represents the Lord of the Underworld on the Mesoamerican tradition, Aztec or Mayan or those entities. Basically, this character, when you die, you have to make your final journey in order to pass that particular space. He's gonna be waiting for you, so you better like have to do something to please him so he let you go. So usually, it's not a big deal. He will let you pass, but he is kind of like funny looking, and also it's supposed to be scary, but it's not. Like part of the tradition, we kind of like take everything with humor. I mean, that is a serious thing. So my wife and I, we always thought that this altar should be a place of like reflection, meditation. If we call it like a portal, we want it to be serious, but also like happy in a way, that nice lighting and everything. So I kind of like made this altar on her memory. The nice thing is that during the whole summer, people in the community helped me to build this sculpture. This is not clay, but I always say like cement, sand, all these elements. I can mold it in a way, the same way I do cement. So it's allowed me to do every shape that I want. So these people help me all summer long, and we finish the sculpture. It's pretty heavy. It's so big, like probably like almost like 8 feet tall. And I create these arcs, and the flowers around these arcs are natural plants. They are not even just the cempasúchil flower that we grow for the first time on North Philadelphia, but also they are like live plants. And the whole thing, I just like put it together and create these arcs. And then the typical candle lights in the front. That day was sublime, was beautiful. Like we have like 100 people, Aztec dancers, ceremony, a lot of food. We have the barbacoa pit there. So just in case you are interested, this year we are doing the exactly same thing, probably bigger. And you know, it's always nice to have that. So I wanted to show this piece because it shows the level of intimacy, the relationship that I have with the sculptures, and how much I enjoy it. You know, as much as I have time, I will always try to do new things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful photo. It must have been amazing, like you said, sublime. So is it going to be on the 30th or October 30th?
Yeah, actually, I think we're gonna do it. I think it's Monday the 1st, because there are so many things going on, and also it's a good excuse to have the actual days that we celebrate in Mexico. But it's still like either the 1st or the 2nd of November.
Oh, right. It's the same as, yeah, All Saints Day.
Like kind
right?
of like the day
Okay,
after.
I got it backwards.
Halloween.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Oops. Let me go to the next slide. Thank you for sharing that. And then wait, is this a permanent? You're not going to move that sculpture.
This one actually
there.
we move it. I did it on purpose. Like I separated on 3 different pieces. So with a bunch of friends, we can move it around.
a bunch of friends. Oh.
Yeah, good bunch.
Yeah.
This one is a lot more lighter. This I think this is U pen on the left, and I think the barns on the right side. These are all paper mache. This is how I start basically doing you know, large size sculptures. My wife, she was like really into paper mache. I basically learned from her, and this gave me so many ideas. With the time, I decided that I wanted to kind of like take this experience, start making anything out of cement, or in this case clay, as a more permanent material.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you see like color, even the skull is colorful with flowers, all these patterns, kind of like tattoos on her face. And then also this type of alebrijes, they like, you know, kind of funny to look at it. So I try to do that.
It's also lighter. You don't need quite as many friends to move these around.
I can do it on my own. Oh, this is one of the heavy ones. The Chuck mold, the reclining figure. This one, I always try to do anything that I do with cement, or now more clay, I try to make it functional. This, actually, this one, I broke it. I made it like in 2 pieces because again, my friends were complaining about how heavy my pieces are. So, okay, I'm gonna divide it. Actually, the head was separated before. I could like have the 3 pieces. I have my 3 pieces rule. But then, so the head of the sculpture can be used not just for planting on the summer, but also like you can burn incense or put some fire for the Aztec dance ceremonies. Same thing, the object that is on his hand, either for fire or incense. But I, you know, it's always carry on my tradition. And this is the garden. This is pretty much probably like 7 years ago or 6 years ago, and in the middle of the we start like expanding, taking other lots. At the background it's just a wall. It's called some pantry. It's just mere it's like a school rag. Represent warriors or women who die delivering. So in a way, it's an honor wall. Like all these faces, they all different, but represent people who pass away, and it's a tribute to them. The big wall for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Where is the garden?
This is kind of like the 1900 block of North Lawrence. It's pretty North Philly. It's in between 5th Street, around Berks. Actually, pretty close to where the new building is gonna be, probably 7 blocks away.
Yeah, it's like between the building and Tyler, actually.
Yeah.
Get the George, bring your students
neighbor.
down there. Yeah, you can just walk.
This is funny. Oh, this is my big plan.
My
This
big
is
plan.
okay. The picture on the right is the mural that I paint, kind of like honoring the Mexican immigrants. This mural it doesn't exist anymore.
I know.
The property was bought. They have a new building, and now we cannot see it. So I'm getting ready to start another one very soon. But
I want to say, wait, I went to this mural dedication.
oh, you did?
I didn't know you. I didn't know.
I didn't know. I met you from
And
there.
my friend was involved, and I was standing in front of it and then I saw them cover it up. I was so sad. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
We can always do another one.
Okay. And then I know I put these two things on the same slide. Maybe I shouldn't. What is my big plan? What does that represent? Oh, that's for Saturday.
We can talk about that later if you want. I don't know.
Okay. Then this one, that's the last.
Oh, okay. This is the last one. Yeah, this is one of the largest pieces I've done, and not just the size, but also have a lot of different medias. This is when the Pope Francis came to Philadelphia in 2015. Me and my wife, we were choose to do, this mural that somehow is gonna celebrate the Pope coming, the families. But with mural arts, we wanted that people who come to this celebration were able to help us to paint it. So we make like panels, paint by color, these different codes, and we end up painting in the convention center. So at least we have 3,000 people helping us painting these panels. And then we later installed the mural when the Pope came. I actually was fortunate enough to come to the Pope and present him a panel that he actually signed. I gave him the marker, he signed it. I still have the holy marker, and he signed it. We didn't hug, I think, but I was this close to him, like really, like I say a couple of things to him, he said a couple of things back to me. Yeah. And it was a glorious, beautiful moment for my family. In the one of these, the many the many TV channels that were showing this moment. In one of those, I can hear my daughter yelling, "Daddy, Daddy!" She was like so far away, and I still can hear the voice. And that's how how proud I am of the things that I do, because I know my family like it, and I hope my kids look at me and Anna, and they, whatever they decide to do in life, they get inspired by the fact that we can work with community and do big things. So this mural is one of those memories.
Yeah, it's so beautiful and amazing. I love all the details, and I especially love the architectural. Yeah, so great. What a great story. Thank you. Thanks for sharing all that with us. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to George's images, what he would like to share with you.
Yeah, so Cesar, that was so good. Yeah, so these are two large. They're probably around like 5 feet tall, each of these sculptures, and this is actually the first couple of sculptures that I made in Philadelphia. So before this, I was living in Seattle, and as Jennifer mentioned, I still hold a gallery there. So these were made as an idea for urban guardians. So again, I like to address guardian figures and like what they protect or who they protect and what they symbolize. So I created a rat and a pigeon as these urban guardians, because they're often overlooked and kind of thought of as like a nuisance or as disruptive or filthy. But if you kind of switch your thinking, they could be like resilient and resourceful. So I wanted to kind of represent or present them in a more like classical stance, and also as these guardians of our urban environment that we're also inhabiting. And these eventually made their way from Philadelphia to to Seattle, hence the background that I decided to paint, to just kind of draw. And this is an advertisement for that show.
Yeah, I love the background. That's great.
Yeah, so I'm mostly showing you like these guardian figures because that's what I'll be, that's what I'm thinking about for Saturday. But this is a small, what I call suited lion. And this one's probably, I don't know, like 28, 30 inches tall, which for me, I consider that small. If I can lift it by myself, then it's small, right? Like if I have to ask my friends, building large or making big things, community, right? Like we're asking for a lot of help.
Yeah, this is how we're now going to measure artwork, by how many friends it takes to carry.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just kind of thinking about just costuming and presentation, and like just juxtaposing something that for me this felt very approachable and very cute. It's almost like putting a sweater on your dog, but it's also this like regal guardian that's usually held for like state houses or temples, or the lion is very like present in those environments.
Yeah, and I imagine when you were traveling in Asia too, there's so many different versions of guardian figures. And I think of I always laughed, we had a Shih Tzu when I was growing up, and I think there's a lot of like little dogs that look like my dog as stones sitting there guarding things.
Yeah, totally. It's amazing. And like the food dogs, the lions in China, just like they look different, right? They have the same symbolism, but the appearance wise, the design of them is so different. So I like that too, the different like design variations within a same form. And this one is based on a cinghiale, kind of a wild boar from Italy. And this one specifically is based on the one in Florence. And I like the seductiveness. Same thing, like it has this like fierceness. They're very dangerous animals. They're aggressive, but this stance, the way it's presented, it has like a seductiveness to it and approachability. So I like that duality of you don't know, is it guarding you? Is it warding you off? I feel like a lot of the guardians, depending on where you stand, it has a different feeling. So from this angle, what's that?
That's a good point. It's all about perspective. Are you supposed to be afraid of it, or are you supposed to be made to feel safe, or are you feeling both of those things at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. Because from this angle, right, like we're being guarded against, but if we're behind, then we're being guarded in a way. So
yeah.
And then I also do figurative work, and a lot of it does, talks about my cultural upbringing. I'm Mexican American, born in Texas. My family's from northern Mexico, from Chihuahua. So I lean into that and have started to lean into it more and more as I just get to know myself a little bit more. So this is an interpretation of Grant Wood's American Gothic, right, which has been reinterpreted multiple times. And I was actually in Chicago this past weekend for a show opening, and that painting is at the Art Institute. So I got to see for the first time the original in person. But this, for me, switches the story of, the matriarchal figure in front. I was, again, talking about my mother all the time. Such a big nurturing influence in my life. So, and a lot of strong women in my life. So I wanted to bring that figure forward. And I think this was made in 2018 or 19, can't remember. But thinking about what we now call essential workers, and it's people that have to continue to keep things moving and keep things running. So just having that like type of dress on the figures themselves.
Yeah, this makes me think of there's an artist, Jonathan Christensen Caballero, who does these great sculptures of sort of people in working situations, essential workers, wearing the clothing needed and with the implements, and very different style, but really similar ideas. That's very cool.
Yeah. And my mother, for most of her life until she retired, probably like 7 years ago, maybe, was a custodial worker. So she was in an elementary school, running the buffers, waxing floors, cleaning things, like day in, day out. And it was very visible physical labor when she would get home after a long day. And then this one is an altarpiece. So again, just talking about community and like bringing people together. So for me, this is an altar for everybody. And the significance is these 4 columns on the bottom, these figure columns that for me represent the 4 corners of the world, 4 cardinal directions, or like the 4 earth, wind, fire, water, elemental, earth. And then the next level on top of that, you can see another face, and that's I think that one might be the wolf, and on the other one there's a lion. So this like cat dog duality, and very like primal. Then the dome on top of that is faith and death. So you can see the skull, and then there's kind of this like saintly figure on one on the opposite side, and then the crown is people. So just like everybody. And for me, it was this crown, like I love people, I want to be in community, but it's a balance, and without everything in the foundation, this crown like sits really low and doesn't stand out. It kind of like gets looked over. So you need this like foundation with everything around us, basically.
Yeah. And how this is pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's about this one's 9 feet tall, 9.5, something like that.
And are the figures on the bottom, they have like openings? Do you pour libations in or something for an offering?
Yeah, they're actually they're meant to, like, they are offerings, and they all have different openings depending on the element that they correlate to. So some of them are, I think the one closest to us is kind of a spout. So that one's water. And then the one to the right is earth. The one to the left is fire. And it all, it's like to hold those elements within the piece. And this actually is now at my alma mater in Texas, in my hometown. So the University of Texas, El Paso, acquired this for one of their new buildings.
Oh, nice.
Just this past year, which, for me, it feels full circle, because I would visit this artist from my hometown, Luis Jimenez. Like, he had one of his sculptures in the library that I would go and see all the time, and really made an impact on just the way I view what art can do. So to have now like one of my pieces, it's like, okay, feels pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations. And then I just ended with these 2 images of your piece from the clay studio last year, but now we can come full circle again to Cesar's sculpture as well, right?
Yeah, so Mictlantecutli, right? So Cesar was talking about this figure, and this is my interpretation. Similar thing last year during the pandemic. The clay studio was so grateful that to allow me to just like install this, this community altar, and people were invited. We couldn't all be there at the same time, but people were invited to leave these small offerings, create little, little figures, little effigies, things behind. And then as the exhibit went on, it just like became more and more full. I started like climbing onto the figure itself. And it was a nice like view of community, even when we weren't together. Like, it can feel lonely in the pandemic when you're in your apartment by yourself, but then you're like, no, oh, people are still there and still support it. So yeah, it was great.
And I mean, in addition to how beautiful it was, and just being the tiles wrapped around the whole small gallery space, and you felt really enveloped in that, that when you said that to me at the time, you know, you feel people will see that there were other people here, and they can feel the presence of the community, even though we couldn't all be there at the same time. It's such a simple idea, but so profound, and one that I think really can get overlooked in a museum setting or a gallery setting, that if you have a way to really sense the presence of all the other people who have been in that space looking at the same art, it really makes it even more powerful. And even not in a pandemic time, just you know, as we are planning the first exhibition in the new building, and as I said, Cesar is part of that council, we're talking about things like making sure there are benches for people to sit on. And it's almost just, even just a bench, like the acknowledgement that you're there to look, but also that there are going to be other people there looking too, just automatically gives you this feeling of being within a community, which if you're just standing in the space and there's nothing for you as a visitor, you don't feel that. You don't feel that you're welcomed. You don't feel that, you know, that it's there for you, for the community. So it's like this really simple idea that is profound, and I'm just so grateful to you for saying it out loud, because it runs through my head a lot, so I appreciate it.
And I think you mentioned to me during that point also, like today's Yom Kippur, right? And you had mentioned to me that I think that when people visit like Jewish grave sites, they'll leave a stone. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's a very, you know, like very similar process. And I think that happens like in so many different cultures, and, you know, a different, maybe slight variations, but there's this like intention to it. So, you know, when you told me that story, I was like, oh, what a beautiful connection.
Thank you for remembering that. I actually, thanks for thinking. Yeah, you brought the skulls you had made already, so it was like a pile, and I didn't put this picture in, but there was like a pile of them, and they looked like rocks. And this idea that, yeah, it's really just, it takes such a small gesture, and this can sort of echo out into the rest of our lives. It's through small gestures, we can really make other people around us feel valued and like we're all in it together, which is something that is very needed in all times, especially right now. Wow, this has been a lovely conversation. I think we have about 5 more minutes, and I just want to make sure that we touch on a little talking about what's happening on Saturday. So I'm going to stop my share and I'll go back to Cesar, and I know that you gave us that nice sketch. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, your idea of how people are going to interact with it?
So basically, because the acknowledgement that has been in the latest year to different institutions, about the fact that we're stepping on Lenape land, and how it's a sad story how people are native were removed from here and they have to migrate, and then even people today that try to claim their lineage, they have a hard time to prove it, and then they have a hard time. So in words, we say this beautiful thing about how we can acknowledge the Lenape, but in reality, we're still like, you know, having this pattern of rejection and not supporting what is there. So I've been thinking a lot on that, and I wanted to take that this opportunity to work with people together to, in a way, like talk about that a little bit. So the piece that I kind of like creating, basically the base for whatever is going to happen that day, is inspired on the one of the clans that step on this land, the Toro. Because we have the wall, we have the turkey, and the Toro. I mean, that's like a more like common, popular in other cultures too, in the other nations on this country. So I got inspired by that, and I gonna try to build this vase that have the shape of a Toro, and then use it as an excuse to all together start building up on top of that. So whatever you think that represents you can be part of that Toro, that it's gonna be welcome. So as much time as you wanna spend with us building your own piece, we're gonna make sure that we attach it, and hopefully beautiful things happen. That's just a small sketch, but think, you know, with clay, everything cheap. And the more people you get involved, the more fun. And I think it's gonna be a great piece at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, that's lovely. Thank you. And actually, yeah, I just, in my short research, that Chief Tamanend, he was called the Chief of Chiefs. He was also called the Chief of the Turtle People. So, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Cesar. And George, do you want to talk a little bit about your plan?
Yeah, so just really quickly, I'll be building a guardian figure for the clay studio, just like, you know, as we kind of are in that space itself. So I'll be constructing a large scale figure. I'm making parts now just so that they could, you know, so that it could be a decent like size sculpture. And people will be invited. I'll bring some of my decorative molds, so people will be invited to like press some of the decoration because it usually takes like thousands of those to fill up one of the pieces, depending on scale. But you know, we'll just kind of play and kind of and see what it ends up looking like. I have an idea in my head, but I'm also, I think, like Cesar was saying, with the vibe of the community present, like that can change it and can direct it in a different way. So always flexible.
Yeah, and truly being open to what the community will contribute, because that's part of the artistic process.
I probably will be skipping my post just to be next to George, learning what he's doing. It sounds exciting, George. My chance to learn from you there.
Yeah,
I feel the same way. I'll make a little something and sneak it in.
Yeah, we want the trade happening for sure. That's great. Well, I mean, this has just been a lovely conversation as usual. I love talking to both of you, and I'm so happy to have our guests join us and for this to be something that we can go back to in the future and listen to, as it's going to be on our YouTube page. So thank you, Cesar. Thank you, George. We will see you and everybody else on Saturday at noon, 1400 North American. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you there.
Yeah.